Good evening, everybody. Is this mic? Okay. So thank you for coming out this evening. We're having one of our monthly fireside chats. It was a quick one. Thank you all you guys for signing up over the last 24 hours. Chris called me about this last night and said, by the way, and all of a sudden we have a fireside chat. So with me this evening is Marissa Mayer. Marissa Mayer is VP at Google. She's VP of Location Services.
Local Maps and Location Services, yeah.
Location. I can remember it from that. Okay. So anyway, but Marissa has been with Google for a long time. Since I think you're one of the first 20 employees.
Yep.
And she has probably influenced you in more ways than you know. Ever since Google launched their search, she has been the one in charge of what that design looks like. Now that's moved on. She's moved on from that to a lot of other products and making sure the design, the aesthetics of it are good. I believe you were the first Google female engineer.
That's right.
And so she's had, since 1999, had quite a bit of experience in the Google ecosystem. She's watched it grow from 20 employees to a couple thousand, 20,000 plus?
26,000, yep.
26,000, okay. So it's a great honor to have her here, and I hope that you'll listen to her. Think of the questions you want to ask, because there's going to be some time afterwards for you to raise your hand and ask somebody pretty much about as high up as you can get at Google the questions that you've been burning with for the last couple of years, the ones that Chris doesn't want to answer. So if you will, with me, give a warm welcome to Marissa Mayer.
Well, I'm very excited and happy to be here. This is my second time in Nairobi. I was here last September and now again. I'm here right now as part of the Associate Product Manager program at Google, which is a program I started back in 2002 because we wanted to find a way to hire and train great product managers for Google. So we started hiring people right out of bachelor's and master's programs. The idea was to give them a lot of responsibility, a lot of on-the-job experience, a lot of mentoring from the very get-go. And we put together this program. It's a 2-year program. They spend 1 year working on one project, and then they spend the next year working on a different project. They work all across the company in search, ads, Android, Chrome, YouTube. They're going to be coming in a little bit, so you'll get a chance to meet and mingle with them. And so it's a 2-year program, but one of the things we really want to have happen during that program is for them to get really broad experience and awareness of Google, not only at the company and across all the different product lines, but also around the world. So at the 1-year mark, we go on an international trip where we visit Google offices. And we meet with the local Googlers and hear about their challenges and their successes and what they're working on. We talk about what we're working on. We meet with users, we meet with advertisers, we meet with venture capitalists, advanced students in computer science, pretty much anyone who will talk with us, and also try and soak up some of the culture. So far in the past 2 weeks, it's all in 2 weeks. It's all in 2 weeks, and it's kind of like camp. So you just keep moving, and we're scheduled for like 17 to 20 hours a day. And we've been, so far in the past 2 weeks, we've been through Tokyo, Shanghai, Hyderabad, India, and now Nairobi. So we're very excited to be here. We went last night, we went to Carnivore, which I hear is a local favorite. So eating ostrich and crocodile and all kinds of things like that, which was fun. And then today we actually did a scavenger hunt where we had to sign up for M-Pesa, and we had to go and get businesses on Google Places and do all kinds of things all over Nairobi, including finding the Nairobi Google office, which is not as well marked on Google Maps as we would like. So that's what I'm doing here as part of this, and I've helped get the program started. Today I still help run the program, and it's just really great to be here as part of that and get a chance to talk with all of you. And so I guess the format is talking a little bit about my background and what we did to get here, and I'm happy to do. I think sometimes questions and answers are good just because that way we talk about what you guys want to talk about. So I want to make sure that we save lots of time for questions about me, about Google, about whatever you want to talk about.
What I was thinking was, if we go back in time to some other things, and this is where Google search does you a disfavor sometimes. When you started off as a grocery clerk, how did you get to Google from there?
Let's see. So yeah, my first job. So my parents had a very strict theory that at age 16, which is about as young as you can work in the U.S., that everyone had to get a job. So all the kids had to get jobs. And so my first job, I was a clerk at a grocery store. And I actually really loved it. I still to this day really love grocery shopping. Like I love when I go to like a new place. Like if I have time tomorrow or Saturday, I'm here until Saturday night. Like I may go and try and check out a grocery store because I think you learn a lot about a place through groceries.
All the guys are kind of looking at you like.
But I was a grocery store clerk at a place called County Market in my hometown. The next summer, I worked there in the summertime, and the next summer I worked at a movie theater because I've always really loved movies. And then went away to school, had a bunch of different jobs at like software, etc., and things like that during the summertime. And also I spent a bunch of time at research labs. So once I learned to program, I spent some summers both at Stanford Research Institute, SRI, in Menlo Park, and also at the Union Bank of Switzerland's research lab in Zurich, Switzerland for one summer, before ending up at Google. And it's actually a kind of a giant coincidence that I ended up at Google. Yes and no, because the summer that I spent in Switzerland, I actually was working on collaborative filtering algorithms for recommender systems on the web. So basically, you would install a client on someone's browser that would keep track of where they went. If someone went to sites A, B, and C, and later someone went to site B, you'd say, well, maybe you should check out sites A and site C. And if you start aggregating those paths over large numbers of users, the recommendations get really good. And so I came back. I was in my last year of my master's program. I did a 2-year master's, and I had been hired to teach at Stanford. And I came back and talked to my mentor, and he was giving me pointers about lecturing for my first class. And at the end, he said, well, what was your research like this summer? And I talked to him about my research, and he said, well, that's so interesting because there's someone on the 4th floor, and they're doing what you were doing, but they're not looking at where people go on the web. They're looking at the link structure of the web, and they're using it to do search. He's like, and they just dropped out to start a company, and I can't remember the name. He's like, it's Larry Page and Sergey Brin. And I said, well, it's fine. I was like, I just got back in the country. I'm like really busy. I'm teaching for the first time. I don't really have time to mess around with a startup. Like no matter, which was probably good because that was like September of 1998, right when they formed the company, and they probably weren't ready to hire people at that point. But fast forward 8 months to the following April, and due to a long distance relationship and a really bad bowl of pasta, that left me in my left me in my dorm room late at night on a Friday, where I was like, I promised myself, it was the height of the internet bubble. I had a lot of offers to decide between already. I promised myself I would make a decision on May 1st. It was April 22nd. And I just remember like seeing this message that said like work at Google. And I also remember looking down and like thinking like this bowl of pasta is just so bad. And it's just so pathetic when I'm like sitting here in my dorm room eating this bad bowl of pasta. And I actually hit the space bar and opened the message rather than hitting delete on it. And when I read down through it, it wasn't just a standard form letter message. It actually was like, well, we've talked to some computer science professors. They said that we should talk to you, and then I started reading a little bit about the company, and I realized it was the company that Eric Roberts, my mentor, had forgotten the name of the previous September. So I mailed them and I said, I'd like to come in and interview, but I promised myself I'm definitely going to pick a job by May 1st, so I need to interview right away. And they said, okay, great. And so I came in the following Tuesday for my interview. I got interviewed by Larry and Sergey. They promptly got up, and they interviewed me at a ping pong table because I didn't have a conference table, so they actually used their ping pong table as their conference room table. So they interviewed me at the ping pong table, got up, walked out, and I heard them, calling around saying, it's time to go and visit the VCs. And basically the company was so small because at that time it was just 7 people. The whole company got up and left with them, except for the office manager, who came in and said, I'm very sorry. I know it was really important to you that you finish all of your interviews. Today, but the entire company has just left and gone with Larry and Sergey to see the venture capitalists, so you're going to have to come back tomorrow. So I came back the next day, finished my interviews, and of course then the rest is history.
Quick question on the interviews. Google's now known for doing a very grueling interview process. Did you feel like you were being grilled during that first time?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Larry and Sergey both, Larry I think was very preoccupied about the meeting with the venture capitalists. Sergey is an unbelievable mathematician. He's the son of a mathematics professor. He's just really, really good at math. And so, because my background was in artificial intelligence, and I had mentioned something about k-means clustering, which is an AI technique, Sergey spent the majority of the interview grilling me on AI equations, and if you have these kinds of this kind of data or that kind of data, what would the different plots look like in terms of finding the centroids? And so I had he really grilled me. And the other thing was, the company was so small at that time. The rule was you had to be interviewed by everyone. So I literally got interviewed by everyone. And the funny thing was, on Tuesday they all left. I went to the VCs, and I had to come back on Wednesday. When I came back on Wednesday, there was one interview where the person. This was Amit. He was asking me questions, and about 10 minutes in, he said, I'm really not sure what else to ask you because I just started this morning. So he was number 8. So they literally had put me in the room with him, and he's like, I don't really know what we should talk about, but we'll just talk. And so you got interviewed by everyone in the early days, and so it had a very good feel to it.
And so you started up pretty shortly after that, did?
Yeah, so that was obviously that was the end of April, and so I joined then when Stanford got out in mid-June.
Okay, so now I know you're a big fan of startups.
Mm-hmm.
Now, were you a big fan of startups then?
It was interesting because when I was interviewing for jobs, I looked at a bunch of different options because I really loved teaching at Stanford, so I had some teaching offers, I had some consulting offers, I had software engineering offers at big companies like Oracle. I had software engineering offers at small companies like Google. I also looked at maybe doing some tech consulting. I looked at doing a bunch of different things. And in the end, I really felt like doing a startup was the right thing. I felt like I wanted to see how a company was born and how it grew. And the other thing that I was really intrigued by during my process was probably my second runner-up offer was a consulting offer. And at the end, I think consulting is really interesting because you get to work on lots of different projects. And I knew I would like doing consulting work. What I didn't like about it was I talked to several friends who were in consulting, and the basic issue is that you get to learn all about the business, and you get to make a set of recommendations, and you make your presentation, and then you walk out, and they make the decision after you leave, and so you never really know why were your recommendations taken or why weren't they taken. And I realized that I would learn more at Google being in the room and figuring out how do you make the decisions about how to build a company, when do you decide to scale, when do you decide to do this, not just being in that recommendation situation. And so that was very important to me. And so I think that there's something really unique in terms of a small entrepreneurial environment of a startup just getting started and trying to understand. We went off, that very first summer, we went after the Yahoo deal. Right? We were tiny. We were so tiny that my second day on the job, the site actually went down. I came into work and Google.com was closed for business. Because it was my first day, people were very preoccupied because they had just signed the Netscape deal. And it's hard to imagine, but at the time, Google had 300 and some odd computers. And they had basically gotten some new computers in the previous week to take on the extra flow of the Netscape deal. And they were doing all this computation to try and make sure that they were going to be able to stay up. And the idea was that Netscape was going to send 1/4 of their traffic the next day as the deal came online. And something went wrong, and someone miscommunicated with someone at Netscape. And basically, they sent all the traffic. And in order to serve all of Netscape's traffic, we couldn't keep our own traffic up, even though it was only a couple 100,000 search queries at the time. My first day, I think we did 400,000 search queries. The next day, of course, the Netscape deal got turned on, and we bumped up to over 1 million. But basically, we had to take down our own site. So they put up a new special homepage on Google that said, in order to serve our partners, we've taken down our site for the day. Which, when you're a web company and your service is down, you're kind of closed for business, right? And everyone was sort of running around, but figuring out how do you decide to take on the Netscape deal? When are you ready? And then we immediately went after the Yahoo deal, which I don't think any of us really even understood what that meant. And I think for our own good, that summer, Yahoo was you're not ready. And so, the next year when we came back to them, they were like, okay, maybe if you do the following 18 things, you could be ready now. But I think being on the inside of that and understanding how a business grows and scales and how you make those types of trade-offs and decisions is just really valuable.
So you came in as an engineer, is that right?
Yep.
So how did you balance that against how you've grown within the company into more of a something administrative role or a product role?
Yeah. It was for me. It was very organic. So when we first started out, we didn't have product management, and I started off. I was doing artificial intelligence work, and I was working on classifying queries and trying to understand how we were going to run ads against categories, or we were going to run them against keywords, and we were trying to figure out all kinds of things. At the same time, we had no one to work on UI. So we put a job rec out. We tried to hire someone who would work on the user interface 1 day a week and do systems programming the other 4 days of the week. And we entirely failed to hire such a person. And so after 4 months of trying to hire this person and not being able to find anyone who was ready to do that, Urs Hotzle, who was our first VP of engineering, called me into his office and said, Marissa, we've got to find someone to work on the UI, because basically we had this big company mailing list, and there would be these huge debates that would break out. And people would say, why is this gray? Why is this black? Why is our font serifed? Which by the time, nobody remembers this, but Google was actually serifed at the time, not sans serif. and they would have all these debates, and people would be like, you're right, it should be sans serif. It should be black, not gray. It should be this, right? And it shouldn't be centered. It should be left aligned. And then no one would do anything. And so Urs was like, look, we're losing all this productivity. Everyone debates this out. Then nobody actually makes the changes. We need to do something. I looked at your background because, interestingly, my undergraduate was in something called symbolic systems, which is philosophy, psychology, linguistics, and computer science all together. And then I went on to do a master's in CS. And so he was like, I looked at your resume, and you have this thing that involves psychology in your undergrad. So please do the UI 1 day a week, and then do your AI stuff the other days of the week. And I said, oh, okay. And then as I walked out of his office, he was like, and by the way, what we don't need is more opinions. He's like, we just need data. Just implement what they say on the mailing list or what you can back up with data, but just do that. So I started working on that, and so I started learning about serif versus sans serif font. It turns out that serif font is more readable, and sans serif font is more legible, which many people say aren't readable and legible the same. But readable means that you can actually read full sentences, and the serifs are designed to lead your eye along long blocks of text. Legible means each letter is more easily singularly recognizable, which makes it easier for spot reading. So we were doing all kinds of, I was reading about things like that and deciding, actually sans serif is the right thing. People want to spot read the results. Starting to do our first user studies in my sort of 1 day a week and weekend time, getting things going. And then actually programming it in what we call the Google Web Server, or GWS for short, based on the acronym. And so I started programming that, and then as different teams were building things, someone would say, well, I'm building PDF search, or I want to internationalize the site, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. I was the person who wrote the code for the front end, so I would go and meet with them and say, how should it look, how should it work? And then Larry and Sergey would say, well, what's going to look different on the site today? And so I would go in and say, well, this is what we're launching, this is what I coded, this is what we checked in, this is what we're going to push. And so sort of just kind of slipped into doing product management without even really knowing it, because we were working on how should it work, how should it look, what would be right, what wouldn't, what would, we would do the user studies and test these things out. And then at some point, Larry went and did, because at the time he was CEO, now obviously he's CEO again, but he went and he did a pivot through a bunch of Silicon Valley companies. And he's like, our company works kind of like all the other companies, except all the companies have this one department called product management, which we don't have. And he was like, and it seems like it's pretty important, and we have these 3 people in the company who all do product management-like things, but none of whom, and all of whom don't necessarily do exclusively what their job title says. Is that rain?
Yes, we have some rain.
Wow. And so basically, Larry took me, Susan Wojcicki, who at the time was working on partnerships, Salar Kamangar, who at the time was working on advertising, pulled us together and got the product management group started. And so I moved into product management, and at the time I was the product manager of Google.com. So basically I was doing all the consumer-facing stuff, Salar was doing advertising, Susan was doing partnerships. Then I moved on to be director of consumer web products. So I had a small team of people who were working on all the consumer things. Then that got really big because we had Gmail and Orchid and Google Groups and all these things that were part of it. Because I was also doing all the search stuff like search, news, images, product search, all that stuff. So we cleaved it, and we had sort of our communications and our apps group separate from search. So then I became the VP of search and user experience. And after a bunch of years of working either on search or tangentially related to search, with that still sort of being the center of my universe, last fall I moved over to get